Hey everyone! Today we're diving into a fascinating part of history, the Celtic invasion of Greece. Imagine this, it's between the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, and the Celtic tribes are on the move, flooding into southern Europe in search of new lands and riches to support their growing populations. As these tribes crossed the Alps, they clashed with the Romans and Greeks living around the Mediterranean. After the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE, Greece seemed like an easy target for many ambitious Celtic chieftains. These leaders guided their people into the Balkans, moving through Thrace and Illyria and heading towards Macedon. They didn't just march through, they conquered several Greek, Illyrian, and Thracian armies, quickly carving out territories. One notable leader was a king named Brennus. He united various Celtic tribes in an attempt to invade Greece itself. However, his forces met their match at Delphi in 279 BCE, where the Greeks decisively defeated and scattered them. After this major loss, many of the Celtic tribes fled to Asia Minor. Although their expeditions into Greece ended in failure, they left a lasting impact on Mediterranean politics and led to the creation of the Celtic kingdom of Galatia in Anatolia. Now, let's rewind a bit to the early interactions between the Celts and Greeks. The Greeks initially saw the Celts with a mix of curiosity and neutrality. By the 7th century BCE, Greek communities had spread to places like Asia Minor, North Africa, and Western Europe. One of the earliest Greek colonies was Massalia, founded around 600 BCE, which is now known as Marseille. This colony was one of the first points of contact between the Celts and Greeks. Greek historians like Hecataeus of Miletus mention Celtic villages north of Massalia. Archaeological findings show that there was significant trade between the Greeks and Massalia and nearby Celtic settlements. The Celts, especially their elites, were eager to trade for Greek wine, fancy drinking vessels, and other luxury items. These goods were more than just commodities, they were symbols of status and power. Celtic leaders would host lavish feasts and give extravagant gifts, reinforcing their social hierarchy through these Mediterranean connections. But why did the Celts start migrating in the first place? Ancient authors and archaeological evidence point to overpopulation and a scarcity of resources in Western and Central Europe during the late 4th and early 3rd centuries BCE. As populations boomed, some Celtic leaders began raiding further afield in search of food and wealth. These raids eventually turned into migrations as entire tribes, including women, children, and the elderly, sought new lands to settle. A powerful prophecy by Callimachus captures the tension of the time, predicting a future struggle where the Greeks would face barbarian swords and Celtic warriors flooding in from the west like a snowstorm. This prophecy highlights the fear and anticipation surrounding these Celtic movements. Most of these migrating tribes moved south and east, drawn by the promise of a better climate and greater wealth. Greco-Roman authors noted that the Celts were particularly attracted to Mediterranean luxuries like grapes, figs, wine, and olives, which were highly coveted and heavily imported by Celtic communities. Greek and Roman accounts of these early conflicts give us some of the first written records of the Celts, painting them as fierce and warlike. This perception has stuck with us through the centuries, shaping how we view these ancient tribes today. As the Roman historian Livy tells us, by 600 BCE, Celtic tribes from Gaul were already settling south of the Alps. These early movements were likely small groups, but over time, this grew into a massive wave of Gallic tribes heading south during the 5th and 4th centuries BCE. By around 400 BCE, some of these Celts had established themselves in Cisalpine Gaul, from where they began to raid Italian cities, spreading fear among their new neighbors. The situation reached a dramatic peak in 390 BCE, when a Celtic chief named Brennus defeated the Roman army at the Elia River and then sacked Rome. This event left a deep scar in the collective memory of the Roman people, escalating conflicts between the Celts and Romans. Even after this incident, the Gauls continued their raids into Italy, reaching as far south as Apulia. However, Rome eventually managed to subdue the tribes along the Adriatic coast through a series of battles between 285 to 282 BCE, firmly establishing itself as the dominant power in the region. Around the same time, Celtic groups moved east into the Middle Danube, forming settlements in what is now Romania and Hungary. The growing power of the Roman Republic put new pressure on the Celtic tribes near the Adriatic, prompting another wave of migration into the Balkans. The Celts invaded Illyria, though they mostly avoided regions under Macedonian control during the reigns of Philip II and Alexander the Great. Interestingly, many Celts found new roles as mercenaries in the Mediterranean. By 385 BCE, the Greek tyrant Dionysius I of Syracuse was recruiting Celtic and Iberian mercenaries to fight in Greece and Italy. These mercenaries proved their worth, with some being sent to assist the Spartans in their wars against the Thebans, where they distinguished themselves in battle. In one notable account, 2,000 Celts and Iberians sailed to Corinth to fight alongside the Spartans. They showed their skill in hand-to-hand combat in battles, earning awards from the Spartans before returning to Sicily at the end of the summer. The sudden death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE left his vast empire without clear leadership, leading to wars among his successors. Sensing the Greeks' vulnerability, several Celtic chieftains saw an opportunity and launched invasions into the Balkans and the Mediterranean. Encouraged by their initial successes, these Celtic tribes split into different bands, some heading to Greece and others to Macedonia, leaving a path of destruction in their wake. Such was the fear they inspired that even kings paid large sums to buy peace before being attacked. By 280 BCE, a large coalition of around 85,000 Celts, including women and children, moved into Thrace and Illyria, defeating local tribes and advancing further south. One Celtic leader, Bogios, led a contingent into Macedon, where he defeated and killed Ptolemy Keraunos, the newly crowned king of Macedon. The Celts displayed his head on a spear as a trophy, plunging the Balkans into roughly 2 years of anarchy as they continued their rampage without any strong central leadership to oppose them. After the death of Alexander the Great and the ensuing wars of the Diadochi, Greece was left weakened and vulnerable. By 279 BCE, Celtic tribes, led by a king named Brennus, sharing the same name as the chieftain who sacked Rome in 390 BCE, saw an opportunity and advanced into Greece. The Greek city-states, exhausted from years of internal conflict, were reluctant to unite against this new threat. Initially, the name Gauls wasn't widely used. They were known as Celts both among themselves and by others. This Celtic army marched towards the Ionian Sea, displacing the Illyrian people, and then overran Thessaly. When they approached Thermopylae, the Greeks were hesitant to confront them, having been weakened by previous defeats at the hands of Alexander and Philip II, and further subjugation under Antipater and Cassander. The historian Pausanias tells us that the Athenians stepped up to lead a Greek alliance against the Celts as they entered Greece. The Greeks chose to confront the Celts at Thermopylae, the same narrow pass where they had famously fought the Persians in 480 BCE. Here, the Celts' superior numbers would be less advantageous. However, Brennus, realizing he couldn't win a direct battle, sent 40,000 warriors into Anatolia to plunder its cities. The Aetolian city of Callium was destroyed, and its citizens suffered brutal atrocities. This forced the Aetolians to abandon their positions at Thermopylae to defend their homes, leaving the Greek forces significantly weakened. Brennus then found an alternative route around Thermopylae and advanced into Greece. The Celts, drawn by the wealth of Delphi, moved towards the sacred city of Apollo. Greek accounts suggest that Brennus was enticed by rumors of the treasures stored in Delphi's temples. However, as luck would have it, earthquakes and thunderstorms hampered the Celts' siege efforts. Reinforcements soon joined the Delphians, and together they managed to drive the Celts back. Brennus, severely injured during the battle, ultimately committed suicide out of shame. After this disastrous defeat, the leaderless Celts were in disarray. Many were left behind to die by their fleeing comrades, who were then pursued and picked off by the Greeks. The surviving Celtic tribes retreated eastward into Asia Minor. This migration led to the establishment of the region known as Galatia, named after the Greek term for Celts, Galatia. Galatia became a notable and enduring Celtic settlement, developing a unique culture while coexisting with Greek and Near Eastern neighbors. In 277 BCE, at the Battle of Lysimachia, Antigonus II Gonatas ambushed and massacred 18,000 Celts who were marching towards Greece from Thrace. This decisive victory solidified his rule over Macedon and bolstered his reputation as a capable leader. Interestingly, Antigonus II was the first Hellenistic monarch to rely heavily on Celtic mercenaries. They played a crucial role in his army during Pyrrhus of Epirus's invasion of Macedon in 274 BCE. These events marked a disastrous period for the Celtic tribes that had invaded the Balkans. Despite their initial successes, they failed to establish significant communities in Greece or Macedon. The coalition of Celtic tribes was shattered, yet Celts continued to serve as mercenaries in the armies of the Hellenistic kingdoms that emerged from Alexander's fractured empire. Some of these mercenaries were remnants of the tribes that had previously invaded the Mediterranean, while others came from Central and Western Europe. The Celts' fierce and honorable performance in battle earned them a grudging respect from their Greek adversaries. They became the noble savage in Hellenistic art, replacing the Persians as the archetypal enemy of Greek civilization.